All right, well, there you have it. We will take some questions, and I ask you if you keep your questions brief, we'll get a few more in, and I'm sure everybody will appreciate that. Yes?
I'm Barbara Maury. I've been an educator since 1971. I meet Bruce. I'm currently semi-retired, and I've worked at every level of education, from an instructor to an administrator to an education advocate, which I'm doing now, special education services, alternative education for ed, etc. My question is, with all this money that you're talking about, billions of dollars that we have to raise, how does that come out to what is it per student? Currently, the state in Jefferson County, for example, in Fort Townsend, provides $6,014 per student. In Chimacum, $6,200 per student. In Posey, $8,100 per student. In Britain, $15,090 for some reason. And my question is, can you break this billions of dollars down into what it is per student? Because I think when you can, you will have a better idea of how you're really providing services to kids in our communities.
Okay. Very good. So can we break that down to a cost per student?
I can try for you. Let me just share with you.
If you could use your mic there.
People in the back.
So yeah, that's very good.
So this is to answer your question as best I can. So right now, and based on the judge's ruling in 2009, before House Bill 2261, okay, we were spending, I believe it was $6,648 a student in the state, from the state, okay? We calculated for the state to, and we might differ on numbers a little bit, but we're somewhat close. For the state to implement 2261, okay, just that, not salaries, not capital improvement, and not inflation. Just today's dollars for 2261. So again, what Kevin was talking about, some of the things he mentioned in his chart, which was excellent. You know, it's so exciting to me that I don't know if we'd be talking about these things if it wasn't the Supreme Court rule. But we are talking about increasing transportation by 141 million, material supplies by $500 million, those kinds of things. So if that is implemented by the year 2018, we determined, based on state testimony, that the cost per student would be $9,710 in 2018 to do what is being asked. Okay, that's what we're looking at right now. And then if you add the salaries, then that goes up to about $12,500. That's what's on that chart.
And thank you. And you're right, looking at it per student is certainly a different way to look at it. I'm just more familiar with the whole numbers, and I knew Mike was more familiar with the per student. The only thing I would add to that, and you might know more too, is special education funding is obviously on top of that, and there are some districts have to take or have to teach developmentally disabled students, and there's some of those that have severe disabilities that I think cost districts tens of thousands of dollars per student, certainly. So I don't know the way that factors into that, but that's on top of that cost.
Other questions? Check.
In 2010, the legislature made a loophole for Microsoft, and so they don't have to pay the Washington State software royalty tax, which is 1.5% for everybody else in the state. And last year, Microsoft recorded a record profit of $23 billion on record sales of $70 billion. Had they paid 1.5 gross business receipts, be a lot of money. Is there any chance of closing this loophole?
Well, thanks for bringing that up. I'm not familiar with that particular tax exemption. Tax exemptions are something the state uses commonly to incentivize business, and whether or not when we pass a tax exemption, they're supposed to be passed with with standards on how many jobs they create and what benefit they're going to have to the state. They're very frustrating to me. I would love to close most of them. To me, probably the more egregious one is a Boeing tax exemption. This was before I was in the legislature, but no state has given a single business a bigger tax exemption than what Boeing has currently. So with tomorrow's expected ruling, closing tax exemptions becomes much easier. Unfortunately, there have been rulings in the legislature itself, mostly by our Lieutenant Governor Brad Owen, that when we close a tax exemption, it is actually new revenue, which is a very unfortunate ruling. To me, it's not at all. It's money that we've already allocated for hopefully a specific purpose, but he has ruled consistently under these enactment initiatives that if we close one, it still takes 2/3 vote. I am very hopeful tomorrow that will go away. There's still a different makeup in the Senate, and so it still might be difficult. There is an independent committee called JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative Whatever Committee on Reviewing Tax Exemptions, and they review probably 10 every year, and they probably encourage us to close 9 of them every year, and we rarely close any of them. I'm actually on the committee. I was on the committee for one meeting because there were some people that were, some other legislators that wanted to play games with a JLR committee and try to amend a nonpartisan report. So I was put on the committee to stop them from doing that. It was successful. But I won't stay on the committee very long. It's a very boring committee. So that's, I mean, tax exemptions are certainly a place there where we can pick up some revenue. For about, and this is rough, but for every cent we take in sales tax, we give out a cent in tax exemptions. That's how many tax exemptions there are. Now that includes all tax exemptions. That includes property tax on churches and sales tax on bread, stuff that we couldn't tax even if we wanted to. But there are a lot, and there are a lot that are contentious on whether they really provide a public benefit or not.
Yes?
The largest tax exemption in this state is the exemption concerning income tax. And I remember the legislature not doing anything about this until Microsoft's, what's his name's dad comes in and imposes a tax initiative, 1098, which a lot of those monies were to be directed to education and health services. Why did you, Mr. Wege, not support that?
Good question. That was an initiative. It did fail. Income tax is a contentious issue, and once a politician like myself opens the door on that, the folks running against me are never going to let that go. It failed, and it failed by a pretty big margin, which was surprising to see. I thought we'd be able to get that in, but
where else are you going to get the money?
Well, you know, it would be great to have an income tax in the state. I mean, it would be some progress. That initiative, even if it did pass, I'm not sure how it would have standed up in the courts. But right, I did not support it.
Okay, fine.
Next question. Kenny.
My question is for you, Kevin. And it's about
I'm not seeing tonight very much.
it's about unfunded mandates. And as I was looking through the legislative update in Boston this morning, there's bills being considered for digital learning and putting EpiPens in schools. But is there any funding connection with that? And unfunded mandates. The legislature has to find out where the money is going to come from to give to the schools. But in the same breath, they're putting unfunded mandates on the schools. Tell me how we cannot have those anymore. No more unfunded mandates. A clear message.
Well, unfunded mandates have.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Easy's good.
Yeah, unfunded mandates is you know, that's and I don't want to argue with you, but in a way, it's a play on words. Some school districts certainly take more funding, and then at the same time are saying you're causing us to do more. My general, and I didn't mention this when I first talked, my general education philosophy is I'm against really any high stakes testing. I wish all the WASL or whatever it's called now would go away. I wish we could allow our teachers just to teach more. I think our teachers in the state do a very good job of doing that. My wife happens to be one of them. Besides the court is really telling us about the K through 3 class size. Besides that, and that's specific from the court thing, I prefer to allocate money to school districts, and for school districts who have a locally elected board of directors to decide how that money is being spent. So whether they want some big class sizes and some really small AP courses, that's up to them. I think that is a purely local decision. But there are a lot of folks that want to do, make sure that school districts do things, and that's where unfunded mandates come in. And in a simple law like making sure that there's EpiPens in schools and that there's no liability for anybody that uses one. And I think we differ there, because to me that is not an unfunded mandate. That is something that the state is helping districts with some perceived liability about, and it is not a cost. I have a bill this year also about CPR education and about AEDs in schools. There have been some districts that have been worried about liability of having AEDs in schools, and I think those are meant to make students safer and to save lives, and are not viewed upon as unfunded mandates. There certainly are unfunded mandates, and communication, I think, is the best method to do about that. I think, but like I said, some of the most onerous mandates we have, I believe, are the high stakes testing. Not only is that very prescriptive on what school districts need to teach, but it's also very expensive for the state to test and grade and publish those reports, and I'm not sure how much value we're getting out of it.
So when you mean communication, me to you, is that what you mean?
That's correct.
Every day?
If you email me every day, you wouldn't be the only person to do that.
His phone number is published, I'm sure of that. Yes?
I have a question for Mike, and I don't know if it's a fair question, Mike. Let me just preface it by saying government, and I mean this, Kevin, personally, government is becoming more and more dysfunctional at all levels in this country. Okay? I don't know what jurisdictional responsibility means when the Supreme Court keeps it. I hope I know what it means. I would hope that it would mean that when the state legislature does not fulfill, because I don't think they will fulfill their obligation, I don't think they can because they don't know how to raise revenue. If they don't, can the court hold each of the legislators in contempt of court?
Let me try to answer that. Just a couple of things first. First of all, one thing Kevin said, I want to remind folks, when Kevin said the court is making us do K-3 funding, they're funding it. The court's not making them do anything that they didn't promise to do. So please remember that. The state came to the Supreme Court and said, we think this reform is important. We're going to fully fund K-3 reduction in class sizes. The state came to the Supreme Court and said, we're going to fully fund education. The state came to the Supreme Court and said, we're going to take care of those, what I call non-employee related costs to the tune right now this year of $500 million. So again, it's not the Supreme Court telling them how to educate kids. They never will take that on. We won't take that on. That is a responsibility of the legislature. So there definitely should be a division between the two entities. And to follow up on that, Kevin is not alone in feeling that the Supreme Court overstepped their bounds. It was a unanimous decision that the state is not meeting their paramount duty. That was unanimous. But it was only 7-2 that they retained jurisdiction. 2 justices believe that they should not, that in fact should remain a division. but the 7 maintained that they needed to hold that. What does that mean they can do? I don't know if Kevin's legislature wants to find out what they can do. I mean, if we are told that we have to pay a fine or serve a time in jail, we report on that day, and if we don't, an arrest warrant is issued. I don't think that's going to happen. What our attorneys told us could happen, I know that the legislature has been briefed on this too. You see, the Supreme Court ruling says that this is the paramount duty, first and foremost. Before you fund anything else, before you do anything else, you must fund, fully fund, education. It's the paramount duty, first and foremost. So the fact that you need more money really isn't necessarily true about what you need more money for education. You may need more money for all the other things that you really want to do, like what Bruce talked about. But what they could do, we understand they could issue some, what you would call contempt, I would call just rulings, that the state legislature will not be able to heat the Capitol building. They cannot issue any more checks to fund the state highway, state patrol until they fully fund basic. There's a lot of avenues they could take. They do have that power. They do have jurisdiction. And by maintaining jurisdiction, they really are sensitive to this, just as like Kevin said. Obviously, 2 justices didn't want to do it. They're sensitive to this division of power. They don't want to serve there. They don't want to tell them how to educate kids. That is their job. They didn't want to do it. But they said, we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to, and Kevin's brought a sheet here saying, this is how we're going to do it. We have a great conversation going now. But to answer your question, yes, they can impose some type of penalty on the state. How that plays out, none of us really know. And we may find out. You may be right, but I'm counting. I think there is good intentions, and I'm hoping that they can't beat their constitutional duty. None of us have to find that out. I did want to emphasize that the court is not ever, and they won't tell the legislature to do K3 or to do this. They will not do that. They will simply say, this is your plan, you better do it, or we're going to step in. That's what I see that happening. Yes?
Yeah. So I'm a registered nurse, and I've worked in the social system all my life. And it seems to me, Kevin, that really the whole thing boils down to, as far as healthcare, education, police, you're talking about taking money from police to fund it, you know, it's crazy. Really, it's corporate welfare we are talking about here. We need to take the money back and use it for our infrastructure, our education, and our health. That's what we need to do. Now, my question to you is, how can we use you? How can we work through our legislature and our Congress to most effectively do that? Because that's what needs to happen now.
Well, that's a great statement, and like I mentioned earlier, I fully agree with you. I'm one of 147 legislators that work in Olympia. So, and I feel comfortable saying that you know, my seatmate Steve Theringer is as passionate as I am about closing loopholes, and so is Senator Jim Hargrove, who in this majority coalition in the state he's the ranking member on Ways and Means. He's helping write the budget, although he's in the minority, so they don't have to listen to what he says. So you're in a legislative district that believes you and agrees with you, and I don't know the best answer to tell you to get the rest of the legislators on the same page, other than I don't want you to leave, but move to Republican districts and vote differently. I think people listen to groundswells, and those certainly have been successful in the past, and creating those and helping with those is helpful. But even that is tough. I mean, literally every day there's folks protesting in Olympia about one issue or another, and some of them are quite large, and it's hard to get attention through demonstrations and groundswells, but they do work. And I guess if you're, and you sound very passionate, and that's probably the best thing that I can do, and to spend time in Olympia, and I mean the people that want to protect this stuff are obvious, and you can try to lobby them as hard as you can. That's all I can tell you. I'm sorry.
Yes.
To continue on this, on the issue of tax breaks and loopholes, and I think that most people really feel very strongly that corporations have really been given a free pass for quite a long while and have been given a lot of loopholes and tax breaks. And it was just recently the article in here about SHB 1663, Behringer sponsoring, I believe you're on that also. It gives tax breaks continuing for 11 years to Nippon Paper and for Townsend Paper Corporation. And how much money are we actually talking about? I mean, they've had this tax break for several years already, and then this is going to be extended into another 11 years. What is the actual money involved in this tax loop that both of you are on board for?
Good question, and you hit the nail on the head there. There's tax exemptions that certainly benefit our district also, this being one of them. I believe the fiscal note on this tax exemption is $3 to $4 million, although I'm not
well, we all
positive
understand,
on that.
excuse me for one moment, we all understand that for every tax break, that the money that is given to corporations in their tax break, that comes out of our pockets. And we're then asked to pay additional money for other kinds of taxes, and gas tax now coming up and like that. So that's really where I'm going with on this, is that, you know, these particular things that come up, we all understand that the corporate tax breaks are coming out of our pockets.
And you're right, they are. And I mentioned earlier about the nexus between tax exemptions, tax breaks, and job creations. This tax break has to do with hog fuel being on site of a mill and that being used in the mill, and then not having to pay sales tax in between that transfer. And it benefits, we have 3 working mills in our district, with another one in Cosmopolis right outside the district. Both Cosmopolis and the one in Hoquiam have shut down, and we've been able to get them reopened. Nippon, if you don't know, Nippon makes telephone directory, which it's obvious becoming a very unpopular item. Nobody's using phone books anymore. They're hanging on by the skin of their teeth. Port Townsend Paper obviously makes their cardboard type products. But this benefits them all, and it helps them. And for this one, I believe there is a nexus between retaining jobs and what this costs the state. And you're right, it costs you. It costs us, I believe, $3 to $4 million. But I can't be quoted on that because I'm not sure. But if this tax exemption, we are in the process of extending it. It came up for a sunset, and for this one, I do hope we can get it extended so that we can continue to have these mills creating jobs in our district.
Yes.
So even in a perfect situation, it's going to take 5 years to catch up what looks like a 30% deficit in the working budget here. So at what point do we have to say, okay, 30%, that means 2 days a week nobody gets to drive with their cars, 2 days a week nobody gets to use their electricity. 30%, your salary gets reduced until this gets balanced. 30%, like why is it that schools always are the ones, and the social services at the bottom are the ones that have to wait 5 years to catch up to a 30% lack when everybody else is sitting up here at the top going, well, we hope we catch you guys up one day. Good luck. Well, you know, one day. At what point do we say, let's take 30% off the top and let them catch up? Instead of waiting, making the bottom wait.
Right. Yeah, and so the 5 year, you're talking about the phase-in period, which is to do with this. It's going to be very difficult financially to fund this by 2018, and I don't. It would be impossible, I think, to fund it all this year and not have a phase-in period. I think the legislature and the court agreed, because the two bills that we passed did have, I don't actually, the bills we passed didn't have a phase-in. That was agreed upon.
Actually, yeah, the two bills did have a phase-in. Like this year is like what you have there, Kevin, is transportation. Some phase-in of kindergarten, full-day kindergarten, and some phase-in of supplies, materials, and so forth. Let me just, can I jump in just a second there in terms of, you know, I think education has, you know, watched and talked and waited for well over 30 years. And why is it important? Well, it's important because, you know, what these young people are going to go out and face in the future is a pretty tough competitive world. And if we're talking about our future and their future, I got 14 grandchildren, you know, I need them to take care of me as I get older. And so we think we were the voice for these 1 million kids. They don't have a voice, they don't vote. So we went out and we sued and we won, and the court agreed with what Kevin said. You're going to phase this in over the next 5 years. And I think that the issue will continue to be, we're not heartless here. We know there are a lot of important issues, health issues, welfare, mental health issues that need to be funded. We never said that those aren't important issues. We've simply said on behalf of 1 million students that according to our Constitution, it is definitely the paramount duty for you to take care of them first, and you're failing in that, and the Supreme Court agreed with that. But there's going to have to be a lot of conversation about what is going to be given and what is going to be taken, what are those issues that can be resolved either through tax breaks or so forth to meet everybody's need here. But I'm not backing down on my request of those 1 million kids that it's time we get it ready. And so I think and I'll keep delivering that message. Here's another thing that I think could make a difference. When Kevin says he's going to put in $500 million into supplies and materials, what he's saying, let's just take that, we're in Port Townsend School District, let's take that to this level. You know, my dad was a first class, I think, BT in the Navy. And when I went to school in the 60s, I didn't pay for sports. I didn't pay for lab fees. I had a pretty good chemistry teacher. I remember one time we fried some ants and ate them. You know, I didn't pay for anything. I showed up, got sports, got my education, so forth. Now when I see a kid walk into Chimicum, their parents writing a $600 check, a $500 check, I'm thinking, wow. Well, the reason that happens, and the reason Port Townsend can't have middle school sports unless they now pay $60,000, and that's after passing a $2.5 million levy, because levy dollars are being used to cover basic expenses, like hiring custodians and secretaries, and cleaning supplies, and paper and printing. That's what levy dollars are going for. Never should levy dollars should go to enhancing. So some of those 30% things to be handled by levy dollars, those maybe some of the health issues, maybe some of the things that local communities really want to address, whether it's an after-school program or whatever it is. But until we cover those basic costs, we're going to always be, you know, this is kind of interesting. I remember the first day I testified, I says, you know, in Chimicum, we're really happy if we can raise $8,000 on our little school auction. And I went to my granddaughter's school over in Seattle, and they raised $80,000 at their little auction. Well, that's quite a difference. And I said, and you know, at Mercer Island, they had a breakfast, and they raised $500,000. And the Attorney General jumped up, I object. And so they brought the attorneys up, and they had a sidebar there, and they finally the judge early ruled, oh, Mr. Blair, I'm sorry, we can't accept that testimony because it was rumor hearsay. I read it in the Seattle Times. So I didn't get to make my point, and I'm sure if I read it in the Leader, they would have been accepted. But I agree. We're all pulling at each other here, and I think now we're starting some conversation here. We're going to try to meet some needs that have been ignored for way, way, way too long. And hopefully that will make a better place for not only our kids, but for all of our citizens. Let's just hope so. Thank you.
Do we have any other closing comments from our panel? Anybody else want a final word?
Stephanie McCleary.
Stephanie, would you like to say
Well,
something?
I just have a question on the jurisdiction issue. Isn't part of the reason to maintain jurisdiction is because the legislature, following Earl's ruling, cut the schools an unprecedented mid-year cut immediately following that ruling? Don't you think that's why they maintain that jurisdiction, so that wouldn't continue to happen?
Well, Stephanie's question was that in the judge ruled, and then after the judge ruled, the legislature state basically ignored that ruling and said, nah, we're going to appeal this, we'll win. And so the question was, well, did they maintain jurisdiction? Because even after the legislature was told, they continued to cut. Not keep even, they continued to cut. And when the judge said, you're not even meeting your paramount duty in this $2,008. I would say maybe, but I would say mainly it was because of a history of neglect, a 30-year period of neglect, which finally got so many people fired up. Like the Attorney General said that we were out in the hallway in a pause or whatever it was, recess. It's a shame it's come to this. It is. It took 30 years. It's a shame it did come to this. I think it's more of they just saw a system that just ignored the needs, many needs, including what the gentleman says here, but the needs of the kids for 30 years. And, doing their best. The intentions are good. They don't want to. There's just being a lot of pull. So maybe this will refocus. But that's why I think they maintain jurisdiction. That's my guess.
And the only thing I want to add to that is, and I'm not familiar at all with the process that the Attorney General went through on this court decision, but the Attorney General is different than the legislature, and I don't know if the Attorney General and the legislature and the Governor's office were working together on these appeals or not. But the Attorney General doesn't, the legislature is a separate branch. The Attorney General doesn't always represent what we want to do and appeal things the way we want to do it. Perfect example was healthcare reform. Our former Attorney General Rob McKenna appealed healthcare reform, and the governor, the executive branch, was very much against that, and both the House and the Senate and the legislature were very much against doing that decision. So they're not always on the same page. I just want to point out. Thank you guys very much for having us here. I actually really enjoyed it, and we're glad to hear your questions. Thank you.